but we have a lot of Kalish method stuff to cover today in terms of the actual principles of the Kalish method, and we have some basic sort of physiology about the hormonal system, the endocrine system, and about the GI system, and we need to cover all of it. So without further ado, I'm going to pass this on to Dr. Kalish, and yeah, I'm just super excited to be here this weekend. I'm honored to be with you guys, and I'm getting you guys just up and running.
All right, thank you very much, Duncan. Hello, everybody. Hi. Okay, so let's get started. You know, let's go back to the basics of this. So number one, I teach, I'm in this privileged position now where I get to work with, you know, a couple hundred doctors a year at the Kalish Institute. I'm on the faculty of the Institute for Functional Medicine, and I'm up in front of 300 to 500 doctors that are interested in this kind of work, like, you know, every month or two on the circuit of modules that we teach through the Institute for Functional Medicine. So I just have my sort of fingers on the pulse of the industry right now. And I have this really, you know, sort of checkered past because I'm a chiropractor by training, not a medical doctor. And I've always been, you know, very strongly in supportive of acupuncturists, naturopaths, and chiropractors. And now, at this point in my career, I mean, it's not a joke, although it sounds kind of funny. You know, some of my best friends are medical doctors, and it's true. But, you know, if you go back to the early 1990s, which is when I started doing this, 1992, you know, you would go to a functional medicine conference, 1992. There'd be 100 doctors in the room. There would be like 70 chiropractors, 10 acupuncturists, a bunch of random nutritionists, and maybe one or two medical doctors. And what's happened now in the current incarnation of functional medicine is you go to an IFM event and it's almost the exact opposite ratio. You know, it's really dominated now almost entirely by medical docs coming into the field. And it's very difficult as I train different types of practitioners, it's very difficult to train medical doctors in this kind of work. And the group that I found the easiest to train, actually, honestly, are the acupuncturists, because it's a systems-based approach, and it's not symptomatically oriented. And there's a really big emphasis on the healing aspect of connecting with patients. And so I feel like if I look at the groups of practitioners that are out there that can practice functional medicine, you know, that are legally able to, acupuncturists sort of stand above the rest as having an advantage of understanding the fundamental heart of the work, which is that it's systems oriented. And there's a couple of caveats to that, right? Which is depending on where you are, what state you're located in, if you're in the United States or what country you're in, if you're outside the United States, you have to check with all the regulatory boards and see what the rules are in terms of you being able to order functional medicine labs and you being able to order and prescribe supplements and whatnot. So you definitely have to sort through those issues. But by and large, for the most part, we find acupuncturists can do really well with this kind of work. And another thing that I've seen over the years with training acupuncturists is that you don't have to embrace every single thing in functional medicine. And for example, with myself as a chiropractor, you know, obviously I don't practice medicine per se, right? I only practice the functional part of functional medicine, not the medical part of it. And so you can really also, as you develop, you know, an understanding of how you want to progress in this field of functional medicine, you can kind of segment out your work. So a very good example of that is when I was first doing the beta testing for these classes for acupuncturists, there's a group in San Francisco who's my acupuncturist, a man named Franco. And Franco and his two other partners run the San Francisco Acupuncture Group. And years ago, they were my test students, and we put them through this class as like a test to see how acupuncturists would respond. And over the years working with that group, they decided that they didn't want to do really all the complicated testing. They decided that, you know, they had a pain and stress-oriented acupuncture clinic, and they just wanted to do adrenal panels, and that was it. And if things got more complicated, they would refer people out. So God bless Franco and his team, you know, they just picked a niche within functional medicine that suited their acupuncture practice, and they ran with it. And so as you learn, and you know, this class this weekend, we're really trying to cover all the bases. So hopefully you'll be able to understand the effectiveness of the adrenal panels and get a general inkling about how to run them and what you might do when a test comes back. And then you also see the breadth of the work in areas like liver detox and infertility programs and those kinds of things that we do in functional medicine. But that hopefully it's a stepping stone so that you can sort of take that first initial step into the clinical practice. And then over the next 6 months, year or two, or whatever, if you find that you really love functional medicine and you want to include it, then you can figure out how that's going to fit into your acupuncture practice. And it doesn't have to be where you do this full-time functional medicine thing. It can be very part-time, or it can be like Franco's group, where you just select out a portion of the functional medicine that makes sense for you. Okay. So back to the story. So it's 1990s. It's just a while ago, 25 plus years now, and in those days, functional medicine was pretty obscure, and it was practiced mostly by alternative providers. The field grew, I think, and grew in response to, as you guys are aware of in your work, the onslaught of chronic illness and the failure of the current medical system to address those issues that are taking a toll on the human population right now. And so I think as people have become sicker and sicker, and as conventional medicine has failed to provide answers, functional medicine has just sort of risen up as a really logical alternative. And I started practicing this work for I was about maybe 10 years into doing this when I decided to start teaching what I was doing in my own practice. And over time, that started to evolve into what has turned into the Kalish Institute, which is a pretty robust platform of teaching now. And when I look at how things have developed overall in the field, we're just now starting to see an explosion of interest in functional medicine among the general population. So I don't know if you've heard this term before, but in Silicon Valley, they use this term of early adopter. When there's like a new iPhone that comes out or some new technology comes out, there's certain numbers of people that will rush in and want to do the new stuff, and the bulk of the population kind of hangs back and waits until something is proven before they go out and decide to change things up. And we're just now entering into this early adopter phase of functional medicine, where you see the more established practices have 2-3 month wait lists, because the numbers of people that are interested in this kind of service far outpace the speed with which we're able to train people. And because there are these natural barriers to training medical doctors, in that they have to learn this whole systems-oriented approach, which is antithetical to everything they learned in medical school, I think the acupuncture groups that I train can be up and running, and functioning in a practice pretty darn quickly. And that's exciting to watch. I think also that when I look at how functional medicine kind of correlates or connects with acupuncture, I think there's some people who are a little nervous about needles, or a little inherently suspicious about anything that's not sort of Western oriented. And there's sort of a interesting vibe with functional medicine, is that because it's lab based, it seems a little more scientific, even though I would probably argue the opposite is true. There's probably thousands of years of science behind Chinese medicine, right? But again, in the American mindset, it's that's sort of discounted. And so I think you can also appeal to a wider range of potential patients with a functional medicine component in your practice that could bring people in. And that certainly was true with me as a chiropractor. A lot of people were really sketchy on chiropractic and didn't want to see a chiropractor, but were really excited to see a functional medicine doc who could help them with their hormones. So that's just something else to consider as you're building your practice. And when we get on you get into the advanced calls that I do with students now, we always have 20-25% of the really advanced students that I train are acupuncturists, because there's certain super smart acupuncturists that they just love the complexity, and they love the interaction between Chinese medicine and then what they can see on the labs and being able to correlate all this kind of stuff. So I think there's a really sort of robust and fun, I don't know, fun's probably not the word, but sort of an exciting element to learning this work and correlating it with another system like Chinese medicine. And I think one of the reasons why we brought Duncan in as a teacher, because he understands both sides of that far better than I do. In terms of how I developed all this, if you do start to look at other areas of functional medicine training, or maybe you've already done some other conferences or seminars, you find that there's some pretty core problems in the functional medicine arena. And one of them is that the training is generally hodgepodge, right? And so you might go to, like a detox class that a lab company or a supplement company or some educational group is teaching, but it's not linked into anything larger. Or you might go to a fertility class, and the same thing happens. It's not linked into anything larger. And so people get these little snippets of information, and it's really almost impossible to put them together. And so this is, sort of been a characteristic of functional medicine training in general. And when I was, again, about 10 years into my career, I sort of saw that frustration amongst practitioners, and I decided to develop a system that was easy to learn, that people could implement without having to put all the pieces together themselves. And so as you'll go through the course this weekend, you'll see that we have a starting place, because that's the first thing that every practitioner asks as well. I'm interested in functional medicine. Where do I start? And rather than saying everything causes everything, which is true, right? And that oxidative stress causes mitochondrial problems, and hormone problems are caused by inflammation, but inflammation comes from your diet. And rather than this endless circle of confusing information, we have a really great fixed answer to that. You start with an adrenal panel and the lifestyle changes. Boom, end of story. And then when the practitioner comes back and says, well, what about an autoimmune condition? Well, I don't know. You start with an adrenal panel and the lifestyle changes. And what if the patient wants to lose weight? Well, I don't know. Is that a little? No, you start with an adrenal panel and the lifestyle changes. And a lot of the inspiration for the Kalish method came from Franco and my experience with acupuncture, because I would go see my acupuncturist and I would say, I don't know what's wrong, Franco, but my neck hurts and I can barely move it. And he would do his thing, and I don't know what you guys do, but he would look at my tongue and check my pulses and all this stuff. And then he would come out of the blue with something. The neck problem turned out to be that I was eating too much raw food, and then I would go to see him for like a skin rash, whatever it was. But what was interesting about my experience with acupuncture was every single visit, I would lie on the table, he would have the nice music, a little incense burning, and then he would check my pulses and check my tongue. So he always started at the same point. So I'm trying to apply that same kind of conceptual framework that Chinese medicine has to an area that's really dispersed or confused of functional medicine. So we have a system that you can just follow. And it's very, if you do other functional medicine trainings, you'll see what I mean, that most of the time functional medicine teachers don't want to simplify because they're afraid that they're dumbing things down, but then it gets to the point where no one knows where to start. So we're really trying to avoid that at the Kalish Institute. Let's see, other things in terms of specifics for acupuncturists. You guys are well positioned to do this if you have a passion and interest in the science behind this, and you're wanting to add something new to your career. We have most of the people that come and get trained with us are at a point in their career where they're very successful as acupuncturists, and they're looking for a little something else to do, they're just curious people by nature. They want to keep learning. And as they obviously, have lifelong learning within Chinese medicine, they often want to take on a new subject and sort of get more intellectual stimulation, curiosity, be able to help a wider variety of practitioners, and also be able to stay up with the times and the fact that, Chinese medicine is, a fixed structure, and functional medicine is something that's sort of embraced this Western idea of science. And I think when you really get down to it, if you get to be an expert at functional medicine, you'll see that Chinese medicine already had all this figured out a very long time ago, and that we're sort of repackaging it in a modern way with this, veneer of lab testing. So it's not like a one is better than other kind of thing. And in fact, the more that I learn about Chinese medicine, the more I realize that, it's pretty much all been sorted through. But the advantage to functional medicine is that it has this ability to progress and do things like look at the microbiome and analyze that, through these DNA tests that probably weren't available 5,000 years ago, right? So there's certain things that are, again, stimulating and interesting that I think you guys can layer on top of an existing acupuncture practice. And let's see, in terms of where the industry's at, we just got back from the annual conference that the Institute for Functional Medicine puts on, where pretty much everybody in the industry comes together for 4 or 5 days to meet. And in general, we're experiencing at least a 20% growth rate per year for all the different types of businesses, lab companies, supplement companies, training programs. It's almost exponential level growth. Like if you own a home in Seattle and it's going up 20% every year in value, that's a huge amount, right? So we're looking at not a normal growth curve right now for an industry, but one that's really accelerated. And I think that what's missing to a large extent from the equation is practitioners that have the social skills and patient interaction skills already figured out, and that if you have that as like a core competency and you're good with people and you're good at communicating and you have a lot of compassion in your interactions, then adding in this sort of new wave of functional medicine can go really, really smoothly. I see a certain amount of excitement in the field now too, as we're seeing scientific breakthroughs. There's a couple new supplements that come out every year that are new and cutting edge. There's different companies that are getting involved in offering things like the microbiome testing. I've been focusing on that for the last 2 or 3 years that we never could have even imagined in the past, right? Now you can actually measure all these different commensal or normal bacteria in your gut, and there's specific ways you can correct the microbiome that even maybe 5 years ago, weren't possible. And as the field's growing and there's more interest in patients, there's more money coming into the field. So there's more ability for lab test companies to develop new techniques, and it's a very, very exciting time to be doing this work. I think the burst of functional medicine and it becoming a sort of household term that everyone knows is still maybe 3 to 5 years away. So if it's something that you're passionate about and you're interested in adding to your practice, if you spend the next couple of years training and learning how to do it, you'll be right on trend when there's really an even larger explosion of interest in this kind of work. My other general advice too, I want to talk about just a little bit from a practical standpoint, talk about the ways that I see this not work, for all types of practitioners. One thing is that if you really are thinking about incorporating this into your practice, you got to make sure you set the legal groundwork. You talk to an attorney, you talk to your state board, you just figure out and make sure that you're doing this in a way that's, defensible, and you're not going to get into trouble with any of the state licensing agencies that are regulating you. So make sure that, you have a framework. Just don't jump in and do it without understanding what the ramifications are. And you may need to, spend some time talking to other acupuncturists who are local that already do the work. You may talk to an attorney, you call your state board, whatever it is that you need to do to sort through the logistics of doing this. And make sure you don't skip that step. That's pretty important, right? But, by and large, your local community should be able to answer those questions for you. And it varies from state to state, obviously. Some states are quite lenient and some are quite strict. And the same from country to country. But we have a very international following, and I've trained people from all over the United States, and you can work these details out. You just need to pay attention to that in the beginning. And then you want to start to think about, selecting the best patients for this kind of work. And in general, the trend always is to find, 10 people that you've tried all of your acupuncture techniques with and they didn't get any better, and then running labs and starting to problem solve for them. That can be a great way to do it. Or you can do something more like Franco did, where you introduce the functional medicine labs as a component of your stress and pain relief practice or your fertility practice, or however it may be, set up already, so you kind of integrate it in. So you can use it as an extra high-level problem-solving tool, or you can use it as a basic introductory, technique that you use with all your new clients as they come in. And in general, I find that it takes 20 to 30, maybe as many as 50 patients that you run through a functional medicine protocol before you really see the full effectiveness of how this work can play out. So your first 5 or 10 patients that you do a workup on, you may not really get the depth of what this work can do. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of experience. You probably have to work with each patient for 3 to 6 months to even see how well this works. But if you can hang in there and you really are interested in figuring this out, then when you get to that point where you've done 20 or 25 patients and it's 3 or 6 months into it, and they're starting to come back and tell you these amazing stories about how easily they just got pregnant, or how their energy levels and their sleep is normalized. Once you get enough of those stories, under your belt, then you kind of become a functional medicine practitioner, you'll have this bug, and you'll probably want to do it, for the rest of your career and as things develop. So again, the goals for us, like in the short term, are to make it realistic for you by the end of the weekend to make it so that you're not intimidated to order an adrenal panel on 5 or 10 patients, and to make it so that you have a basic understanding of how to set up the supplement programs for each one of those people. And that and then maybe a little bit with the lifestyle coaching. And that as an entry point into functional medicine will give you a general sense of if this is something that, is going to capture your attention for a certain period of time or not. And it's certainly not for everybody, I don't think. And so I think the worst case outcome of this class is that you do 1 or 2 tests and that, you're like, I don't know, I don't really like this. It didn't really work. Yeah, but that you'll have a general understanding of functional medicine itself, and maybe you'll be able to reach out, find a couple local practitioners that are experts in functional medicine. So when you get an obvious case that could benefit from this work, you can make that referral. So I think that's the worst case scenario, is that this will be a survey course, and you'll understand as much as possible who are those candidates that you should be referring out for a functional medicine workup. Best case scenario is you end up like I did after my first functional medicine conference, where you're like, this is my passion, this is my life, this is what I want to do the rest of my career. So we're kind of trying to be realistic about, what you may get out of this class and make it as useful as humanly possible. There's also one other thing, and I think, Duncan and I really agree on this, is that everything that he and I are going to talk about throughout this weekend is practical patient application stuff. Even when it sounds a little theoretical, hopefully what you'll see is that we use PowerPoint slides, and we use dialogue and conversational tone and word choices that are exactly the same way that you could communicate with your patients about this work. So we try to not make things overly complex. So when we're talking about liver detox later today, I'm not going to be slamming you with cytochrome P450 pathway, glucuronidation's a little different than sulfation kind of stuff, like all that sciencey stuff that I actually think is really interesting. What we want to talk about instead is, it looks like from the labs your liver detox pathways are clogged and it's not working very well, and you're not able to bind up and get rid of toxins. Let's talk about how we can start to fix that. So hopefully as you're listening to the various PowerPoint lectures, you can start to see that these are the exact ways that you could explain this work to patients, because one of the biggest, probably the biggest factor in being successful in this work is the basic patient education ability, right? Your ability to talk to people, number one, to get them excited about ordering a test, because if they don't order the test, nothing's going to happen, right? And then number two, when the test comes back, being able to communicate with them about what the test means and why you're going to make these, certain lifestyle or supplement recommendations. If you get those basic talking points down, and you're good, obviously, already at the communication part, and you get sort of the spiel or the words and the ways and the phrases that we use in functional medicine down, then you'll be able to be really successful at getting people to order the tests. And when the tests come back, explaining how the supplement programs work. So if we can just cover that in the weekend for the adrenals, and then introduce you to some of these other more advanced topics, that's really kind of the goal and what we're shooting for. And then I think the format of the class is pretty straightforward. We're going to take breaks on a regular basis. We're going to open up for questions on a regular basis. I'm going to give us a break right now for a few minutes. And then when we come back, Duncan will be speaking, going over the PowerPoints, and he'll carry us through the lunch hour and then after lunch. And then once he's done with the after lunch lectures, I'm going to come back at the end of the day and go through the sections on detox and female hormones.